What's up, Duval? It is Bucky Brooks, and this is Believe in Jaguars, a podcast dedicated to our favorite team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Today, we're going to talk about some of the problems that are plaguing the Jags, particularly the offense. But before we get into breaking down the offense and what's going wrong, let's pay off our sponsor. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, even live odds and spreads to bet on during games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our $200,000 mega contest. Pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance to win weekly prizes and a share of the $200,000. When the game is over, head on over to our online casino. Get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet online. The game starts here. Guys, as we know, the game has already started for the Jacksonville Jaguars during the regular season. We're currently sitting at 0-2, and I think the 0-2 start is a bit of a surprise to everyone who has kind of followed this team over the course of the offseason. We were entering the season really worried about the defense. You had a switch in defensive coordinator. Mike Caldwell's out. Ryan Nielsen is in. You had a handful of new players and young players playing in prominent roles. You wondered how the defense would come together. Surprisingly, the defense has been really strong, really tight, has really kept the team in games. You think about all the young players that are kind of cycling in and out in the defensive backfield, Jerry Jones and Buster Brown and DeAndre Prince and some of the other guys that are playing prominent roles. You would think that the struggles would be on the defensive side of the ball. But offensively is where the Jaguars have really got into the most problems. You're talking about a team that was expected to light up scoreboards. Trevor Lawrence gets a big lucrative extension because there's an expectation that he's going to play like a top 5 or eventually a top 10 quarterback. You think about the wide receivers that were brought in. Gabe Davis comes in. Brian Thomas Jr. was brought in on a first-round pick. You have Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram, who played really well for the team since Doug Pederson has taken over. You had an offensive line where you brought everybody back and added Mitch Morse. There was an expectation that this team was going to hit the ground running, particularly with Travis Etienne rivaling Christian McCaffrey as the only back in back-to-back years to have over 1,400 scrimmage yards. Look, we thought this team was going to light it up. And through 2 games, this offense looks nothing like an elite offense. This offense is only averaging 15 points per game. This offense ranks near the bottom of the league in third down percentage, red zone percentage. You're talking about a quarterback who has really, really struggled on money downs. And I mean, I'll just be honest, it's been tough to watch. And so with all of those things that are kind of swirling around the team, people upset on who is the real play caller. Is it Doug Pederson? Is it Press Taylor? I think we should just take a deep dive into offense and kind of figure out if we can determine how to best solve the issues, how this team can get back up and running and play really well next Monday night against the Buffalo Bills, and what some would say is a must-win contest for this team to kind of retain some of the hopes that they had in terms of being a playoff contender. First things first, when we look at the offense, what is plaguing the offense? What are the biggest issues? And without even talking about players, just in looking at the offense, I would say the issues stem from communication and execution. Communication in terms of too many times it appears that the players are not on the same page. And whether that is the play call coming in the huddle, guys not knowing the plays, not understanding what Trevor's saying in the huddle, just not knowing their position, not being prepared enough to get ready to play. Communication appears to be an issue in the pre-snap phase of it. We saw a penalty that cost the Jaguars potentially a winning touchdown when Dearness Johnson didn't get lined up correctly because he lined up on one side, had to run across the field on the other side. The referee said that he didn't get set before he went in motion. Trevor throws a touchdown pass to Christian Kirk, but it's taken off the board, and the Jaguars are unable to cash in on that 7-point opportunity because of, I would say, like a blown assignment or a communication issue. We've seen other times where we've had to burn timeouts because the play clock is running down. Trevor still doesn't have the play. They're not out the huddle. Those things have been problematic. Not to mention, just from my vantage point on the field, on the sideline, the amount of times that I've watched the field and I'm looking at the wide receivers and they kind of have their hands up in terms of not knowing which way to go, there just appears to be some little things that need to be tightened up to help this offense operate a little, I would say, more smoothly when it comes to the pre-snap phase of the thing. And only the Jags know internally how they clean that up. Do they clean it up on the practice field? Does it require more walkthroughs? Do they need to do more things the night before the game in the hotel where they're going over the plays and everyone knows exactly what they're doing? Does it require Doug Pederson and the staff to be simpler, meaning, hey, let's carry less volume on the play sheet. Let's do fewer things, but do them really, really well so everyone can execute and play fast. Remember, that's what the defense did to help themselves get off to a fast start. They streamlined everything, made it really easy for the players, made it where the players can just play fast and free and not think. It's really worked for the defense. Maybe the offense has to consider simplifying even more to allow their players to execute at a high level, because right now it's not getting done. The other part of the communication, I would say, appears to be like, hey, are the coaches really on the same page with the quarterback and those things? Meaning, are we beginning to see the evolution of Trevor Lawrence, where Trevor Lawrence has more ownership over what the Jags are doing offensively? If we haven't reached that point, we should be nearing that point, because 4 years into the league, just anointed as a franchise quarterback based on the contract, Trevor Lawrence, Doug Pederson, Press Taylor, the situation should be more of a partnership as opposed to a coach-player relationship. They should be on the same page trying to figure out the best way to approach the offensive plan each week, with Trevor's opinion heavily weighted on the calls that appear on the call sheet. We've seen this week, Trevor Lawrence has probably been more animated than we've ever seen when it comes to taking accountability for his own performance of the unit, and also holding guys accountable for maybe not being prepared, not doing their job, calling people out and talking about those things, not necessarily in the press conference, but we've seen his animated actions on the sideline. We've heard him talk, I would say, in generalities about this team needing to be better, needing to be more on the P's and Q's and the details and those things. To me, that is a positive development in the evolution of the quarterback as he goes from kind of being just QB1 to being the face of the franchise and the franchise leader, given the contract and given his status on the team. So those things are positive and those things need to get corrected. But I think it's positive that the quarterback has kind of talked about this stuff and the accountability and the message that Doug has put out there in the press about, hey, everyone needs to do the job. We got to be accountable. We got to make sure that we continue to execute it. He put some of it on himself to make sure that in practice, they're giving those guys enough reps where they really understand what they're being asked to do. They understand how the play should be executed, and they're given enough reps to execute it to the point where it becomes like habit as opposed to, I got to really think and remember what I'm supposed to do on this play call. Hopefully that transpires on the practice field to help the team perform better. When it comes to the execution, I think the execution just kind of stands out, or the lack thereof stands out when you watch the team. Just looking at the numbers, the Jaguars ranked at the bottom 10, within the bottom 10, like in every major offensive statistical category. They're down at the bottom in third down percentage. They're down at the bottom in red zone. 15 points per game puts them down at the bottom. Just not a lot of production from an offense that has several high-powered playmakers that can get things done. When we talk about number 16 specifically, Trevor Lawrence's third down percentage, 21.4%. That is lower by like 12 percentage points than Bryce Young, who just got benched by the Carolina Panthers. Obviously, when your quarterback is struggling, not through any fault of his own, it could be partially him, it could be offensive line, it could be all of that. But when you put up those numbers, those pedestrian numbers that I just quoted, yeah, it's a problem. It's going to be hard to win games at a high level when you're not productive, when you're not efficient, when you're not effective in what we call those critical situations. When I look at the numbers even further, so let's talk about third down. 5 of 19 third downs have been converted by the Jaguars. That percentage is 26.2%. Ideally, in a perfect world, you're anywhere from 35 to 40%. on the conversion rate on third down. And that is a lot of times determined by if you can get yourself into third and manageable, meaning third and 4 or less. That gives you a chance to be able to run or pass on those downs, and you should be able to convert at a high clip if you can get yourself into that. So the third down percentage will go up if you're able to win better on first and second down to set yourself up for third and short situations. So that is an area. Red zone has been problematic this season. Only 3 of 7 red zone opportunities have been cashed in and resulted in touchdowns. That puts you at 42%, once again, which is low. You should be, man, you're talking about higher percentiles. If you're really, really good, you're talking about high 60s and 70s in terms of being able to cash it in, get the 7s instead of settling for 3s. You settle for 3s in this league, you're going to lose a lot of games because in the fourth quarter, we talk about a league in which most games are decided by 8 points or fewer. Every time you settle for a field goal, man, that is a -4 that you're walking away with in terms of being able to stack the deck and put the odds in your favor of winning games. You got to make sure that you turn those 7s in, because when you score touchdowns, it just changes everything in terms of offense, defense, special teams, and how you manage the overall game. So when I think about the offense and I think of the communication, the lack of execution, those are the biggest issues, and it shows up in those money downs. And so third down, money downs, you got to be able to convert. Everyone talks about it. Red zone, got to be able to put the ball in the paint. It comes down to communication, so everyone's on the same page. And then it comes down to everyone has to do their job on those plays to make sure that you get the job done. You have a winning down, you have a positive conversion, which allows you to stay on the field. And then in the red zone, when the area is tighter, attention to detail matters more. You have to be on it. You got to dot your I's, cross your T's, make sure you do exactly what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to do it, when you're supposed to do it, to give everyone an opportunity to execute the play. So with miscommunication and execution, faulty execution, plaguing the Jags, it comes down to the individual players. And I think it's important that we start from front to back, because this is supposed to be a team that was built in the trenches that then would allow you to dominate on the perimeter. But when I look at this offensive line, I don't see the offensive line dominating to the level that we expected. Mitch Morse was supposed to come over and give this team the traffic cop, the communicator, the guy that can sort everything out so he can alleviate some of the pressure on Trevor Lawrence to make sure that the offense is always in the right look. That part may be happening, but the problem that we're having with the offensive line in particular, our edge blockers are not playing at a high level right now. We're not getting great football from Cam Robinson or Anton Harrison at the moment. And what's disappointing about that is Cam Robinson, to me, is the point of the sword when it comes to the offensive line. When you watch him, his vocal nature, his, I would say his athletic arrogance rubs off on the players, and they kind of embrace some of the confidence and even cockiness that he shows when he kind of walks around with his swag and his sweet towel hanging out the back and all of that. Anton Harrison is supposed to give them an A-level player, former first-round pick, played really well last year at right tackle. The expectation was he was going to be so good that he could eventually supplant Cam Robinson as the left tackle, as his team has an eye towards the future. I would say based on the way that both of those guys have played, I think everyone in the building is probably disappointed in their performance. And quickly, these guys have to kind of up the ante when it comes to their play, because number 16, Trevor Lawrence, is not going to play well if he's constantly harassed off the edges. We saw it against the Cleveland Browns, Myles Garrett living in the backfield, being able to harass Trevor. He just couldn't get comfortable. Some of that is, look, it's a tough matchup against a guy who's a defensive player of the year, but first-round picks are supposed to be able to hold their own. Anton Harrison had a tough time holding his own. And then his buddy on the other side, Cam Robinson, not only struggled in pass pro, but he wasn't really effective as a run blocker. If the Jaguars don't control the game at the line of scrimmage with their two best edge players dominating their matchups, it's going to be hard for this team to win consistently. I can talk about the interior struggles. Look, Ezra Cleveland, Brandon Scherff is an older player who's hanging on by a thread, but some of those things we already knew. Brandon Scherff is going to have some downs that are going to be ugly downs just because of his age, his injury history, and those things. But you can play around those things if everyone else is good. What you can't do is overcompensate for an interior player when your edge players are not playing well. And right now, the Jags they have to do that because Cam Robinson and Anton Harrison have not been able to live up to or play up to expectations. Hopefully that turns around this week on a Monday night game because you have an extra practice day or two to kind of work on your game. But until 77 and 74 play well, this offense is going nowhere because the offensive line kind of gets it going. And if they're not controlling the trenches, you have no chance of being able to get it done. And so when we think about getting it done, let's go to the perimeter. So much of the conversation in the offseason, particularly in the summer, was about how dynamic and how explosive this offense could be, how they had better pieces of the puzzle in terms of better fits to the puzzle. Once Calvin Ridley departed, you bring over Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. They were supposed to be perfect complements to Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram. What I'm seeing is, hey, those two guys are terrific. They are as advertised, particularly Brian Thomas Jr. He's averaging over 23 yards per catch. Anyone who was in the stadium who got a chance to see him catch that deep ball over Denzel Ward, you saw the speed, you saw the acceleration, you saw things that you haven't seen in Jacksonville since Jimmy Smith was there. And that's being, I would say, like holding Jimmy Smith in the highest regard. That's how esteemed he is in the organization. Brian Thomas Jr. is a remarkable talent. And that catch that he made, the 66-yard catch where he caught the ball and fended off Denzel Ward to take it in the red zone, that is exactly what you want to see from him. So he has delivered what you thought he would deliver as a first-round pick. Gabe Davis has given them solid contributions as an outside receiver with size and speed, capable of winning the 50-50 balls. But to be honest, Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis were supposed to be complements. If we are at the steakhouse, they're supposed to be more so the sweet potatoes and the broccolini, not the filet mignon. That was supposed to go to Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram. We've heard the entire offseason, Press Taylor, Doug Pederson talk about this offense working inside out. 13 and 17, setting the table. The other guys kind of getting the scraps when those guys aren't eating. Well, it's been completely upset and in reverse because when I look at this team, Christian Kirk has 7 targets in 2 games. He has a drop. He has 2 others that were kind of borderline drops that he hasn't been credited with drops in the stat sheet. But I think if you asked him in the wide receiver room if that was a drop or not, he would probably confess to it. Evan Ingram had 4 targets in game 1, didn't play in week 2 because he had a hamstring in pregame. Well, if you're not getting the kind of production that you expect from Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram, that's a problem. And the problem is, I know the ball typically finds the open receiver. Sometimes you want to stack the deck. So the open receiver is number 13 and number 17. Haven't done that to date, but it's one of the things that we have to work on. Another part of the offense that we have to work on the outside is how do you continue to bring in the young players while making sure that the older players, the established veterans, are doing their job. So as much as I talk about not finding 13 and 17 and where are they, I think there have been some good things. Obviously, I told you about Brian Thomas Jr. delivering. Bretton Strange had a solid game, being able to be a last-minute, I guess, fill-in for Evan Ingram. How do you continue to build upon what those young guys are doing without taking away from what Kirk and Ingram should do offensively? I think that has to be a conversation that Doug Pederson has with the staff to make sure that, look, the young guys in the supporting cast, they're having their opportunities, but you want to make sure that your main guys are still the main guys and they get enough opportunities to really impact and influence the game. In a players' league where you need your best players to dominate and shine, the Jaguars have to get more from their star players. So you need Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk to dominate because they're the number 1 options in the passing game, even though Brian Thomas Jr. is closing fast in terms of earning a little sliver, a little column on the play sheet where the ball has to go to number 7 and you make a concerted effort every quarter to make sure he gets a touch or 2. You still got to have Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram get it done. Finally, when I look in the backfield, Travis Etienne has been so good the past 2 years. Travis Etienne has had over 1,000 rushing yards and 400 receiving yards and shown that he can be a dynamic player from scrimmage, multi-purpose, multifaceted, runner, receiver. He can do those things. He's a little more to the perimeter than Tank Bigsby, but you like the combination of Bigsby and Etienne. To be fair, Bigsby didn't get an opportunity after getting absolutely shellacked on a kickoff return to kind of put him down for a bit as he was dealing with an injury. He fumbled, which you don't like to see, but he was taken out of the rotation. And so Travis Etienne kind of had to do it by himself. Dearness Johnson got some carries and reps and those things. We need to see more big plays from Travis Etienne. Some of that is handing him the ball and letting him be the grinder, let him find the dirty yards between the tackles. Another part of that is catching the ball on the perimeter. Swings, screens, option routes or checkdowns, giving the ball to Travis Etienne in space where there's not 1 on 11. It's more so him against 1 or 2 defenders in space. There may be a way to juice up your offense and have more explosives because this guy can make you miss and he has the distance to take it a different distance. Tank Bigsby, he looked like he's carving out a role for himself as the physical back between the tackles. It's unfortunate that he got dinged up on the kickoff, didn't really have a major role of responsibility, but he is someone who has to play because if you ask me, the marquee should be split between Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. Their carries should be around the same. To me, Tank Bigsby has closed the gap in terms of his ability to function as a workhorse, while Travis Etienne appears to be more comfortable as the change of pace weapon who can do the dirty work of the number one, but also can get in space, catch the ball out of the backfield, and do some things. Regardless, the Jags need both of these guys to take their games up a notch because the running game could be the steadying force to an offense that's leaned heavily in the passing game the first 2 weeks. Maybe the Jags kind of turn the clock back and go back to running the football with Travis Etienne, handing the ball to Tank Bigsby, establishing themselves as a physical team at the point of attack, and then attacking the perimeter with wide receiver screens, intermediate routes that are RPO, like an occasional deep shot to keep the defense from condensing and collapsing on this team like they're playing half-court basketball in the Y. And if those factors go the Jags' way, then you'll see this offense get back to scoring points. 15 points is unacceptable. It's not going to be able to get it done, particularly when you're playing some of the best teams. In my mind, as the Jaguars hit the practice field this week, Doug Pederson is addressing all of those issues: communication, execution, performance and production of the top players, talking to the coaching staff to make sure that, hey, here are the 4 or 5 best players that we have. These are the guys that should touch the ball. If it goes anywhere else, I'm going to be unhappy. Let's let the stars decide whether this team wins or loses. It's on the stars to deliver that star power performance. And if they do that, the Jazz can go on the road in primetime with the football world watching and remind everyone how good this team is and how good they will be when we get to the stretch run in November and December. So leave a comment. Let me know what you think about those thoughts as we talk about the offensive problems for the Jags. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. Tell a friend to tell a friend about the cool things that we're doing on Believe in Jags. Also, make sure everyone goes to Fubo and check out the Believe Network. Also, check us out on YouTube. A lot of great stuff that my colleagues are doing as they talk about their respective teams. As we get forward, we have a Friday pod. We're going to talk about the game against the Buffalo Bills. Looks like it's going to shape up to be a good one. So even though we're 0-2 and they're undefeated, last 2 times the Bills and the Jags have met, the Jags have been able to get it done. Can they do it on Monday night? That's what we'll talk about the next time I join you on the podcast. Until then, I'm Bucky Brooks, and I'm out.